Hello, hello, hello. What is up? And welcome back, my friends. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Friends Untold. And today, for a true crime recap, we got a lot to talk about. This is going to be a long one. So I hope you got some beverages to drink. I have the rest of my energy drink, which this is Cosmic Cosmic Vibe Celsius. By the way, it's fantastic. And I just tried the Galaxy one that is glorious. So have that. I have my nice water bottle filled with water. Make sure you are hydrated. So with the whistle, let's get into it. Oh, and if I piqued your interest, please subscribe, turn your post notifications on all. That way you know whenever I upload. And don't forget to like and comment on this video. That way it gets out. The algorithm is really important. I don't know how it works. I mean, I've been on YouTube for 2 years. Yeah, I still don't know how the algorithm works. I just kind of do what I do, and yeah, that's why I am where I am. Anywho, so the first one we're going to talk about is something that everybody has covered, every which way from Sunday, but it's not, it is the murder, why it's back in the news, but it's not at the same time. So 17 years ago, there was a crime that was committed, and one of the perpetrators is talking about it. So back on September 22nd of 2006, 16-year-old Brian Draper and his friend Tori Adamsick killed a fellow classmate. As soon as they say that, I'm pretty sure you know where this is going. So they killed 16-year-old Cassie Stoddard. What she didn't know that day when they were filming her in school is that's the last day that she would be alive, and this is how she would be last remembered because they literally had her on video. We're sick psychopaths that get pleasure off of killing other people. These are the words that Brian states just minutes after him and Tori kill Cassie at her aunt and uncle's home. So that day on the 22nd, they brought a camcorder to school and filmed themselves in the halls of their school in Pocatello, Idaho. They also would film Cassie, who would seem kind of shy, or she would like shyly stare at the camera on what she didn't know would be the last day of her living. That afternoon, they would hang out with Cassie and her boyfriend Matt Beckham that evening to watch Kill Bill Volume 2 at her aunt and uncle's house. So she was hired to watch her aunt and uncle's house and their animals that weekend because they went away after the movie, or it's that week. Anywho, she was hired to watch the home. Brian and Tori ended up getting up and leaving after the movie ended, stating that they enjoyed movies in the theater over watching them at home. Her boyfriend ended up staying with her even after they heard loud noises and eventually the power would go out. Cassie started to feel super uneasy. So Matt would even go to the lengths of calling his mom to see if Cassie could stay or that he could stay at Cassie's aunt's house, but his mom said no. Cassie was asked by Matt if she wanted to go home with him, but she said no, and eventually he would leave as well. So those strange noises in the house were Brian and Tori after they snuck back into the home. They cut the power to the house after playing with the circuit breakers. They tried to lure both Matt and Cassie downstairs in the home, but it just made Cassie frightened. After Matt left, this is a chance that they had in order to attack Cassie. So they would slam the closet doors, they would screw around with the lights to scare her even more. That was before the power went out. They would approach her and attack her as she laid on the couch in the living room. They ultimately stabbed her about 30 times in the neck and chest, ultimately killing her. Brian would record a video of himself stating, "I just killed Cassie. We left her home. I just stabbed her in the throat and saw her body just disappear." So Cassie wouldn't be found for 2 whole days after the murder. Her 13-year-old cousin was the one that found her in the living room, and her body was bloody and butchered. Her aunt and her uncle never imagined that this was something that would happen in their home when they just simply left for a few days to have their niece watch their home. After the murder of their niece, they never stepped foot in that house ever again. Ever again. The murder of Cassie Jo Stoddard was determined to be premeditated and took about 5 days before Tori and Brian were caught and charged with murder. They were both sentenced to live without parole on August 21st of 2007, and they were sentenced to an additional 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder. So the reason why they're back in the limelight is because they're talking about the murder itself. Because they're in jail basically for the rest of their lives, they want to clarify on some things, which I think they just want to get another thrill off of what they did to Cassie. Hence why I wanted to cover it in this week's True Crime Recap, because every single thing I read was basically, it seems like he was just feeling the glory of what he did to her. Well, both of them did to her. More or less Brian than Tori. It seems like Tori was just there. He was the fall guy, kind of like Billy Loomis and Stu Macher, which is what they based this murder off of, was Scream. Brian was Billy, and Tori is Stu. So it just seems like Brian was the main perpetrator and Tori was just collateral. Could we possibly figure out who the redhead killer is? Well, So previously on my channel, I covered the redhead murders, also known as the Bible Belt Strangler, and in my introduction video, I disclosed the possible identity of that killer. Well, there was an update as of a few days ago. The only survivor of Jerry Johns, known as Elle, which I actually disclosed her name in one of those videos, she believes that he was behind the string of murders. Since the murders, Jerry Johns has died, unfortunately, but he has been linked to one of the other killings, like I previously mentioned in those videos. I will have them linked in a card above. It's a whole playlist that I did well over a year ago. And I'll also hopefully have the playlist in the description box below. So he was linked to the murder of Tina McKinney Farmer, who was found dead in December of 1984 near Jellicoe, Tennessee. Elle was talking about her troubles since the murder on the Murder 101 podcast. So Elle states that there's no reason for her to actually be alive except for God keeping her alive. She also had no idea that Jerry Johns died either. So he died in 2015 in prison. And prior to her being contacted about DNA, the DNA that proved he was the person that killed Tina Farmer. So he died prior to that. Each of the victims looked very similar to Elle, hence the MO of the Bible Belt Strangler. There are 6 victims that are tied to this killer, but there are also others that could be potential victims of him. So the TBI, or the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, is still investigating whether or not Jerry Johns could be the Bible Belt Strangler / redhead killer. Over the past few years, there has been multiple identifications of the Jane Does that were confirmed victims of the Bible Belt Strangler. So these victims and the identification dates are Lisa Nichols. She was found on September 16th of 1984, and she was identified in June of 1985. Tina Farmer, or Tina McKinney Farmer, was found on January 1st of 1985, and she was identified on September 6th of 2018. Tracy Sue Walker, found on April 3rd of 1985. She was identified on August 30th of 2022. Michelle Lavone Inman, found on March 31st, 1985. She was identified back in July of 2023. S.B. Pilgrim, she was found on April 1st of 1985, and she was identified on October 1st of 2018. Each one of these as well, I have their Jane Doe names in their videos. So if their name doesn't look familiar, you'll see them. Because Tracy Sue Walker, there's an update video that I did, which is also in the playlist. And I think the same thing about Michelle Lavone Inman. Possible victims of this serial killer are Priscilla Ann Blevins, who was found on March 29th of 1985. She was identified back in 2012. Karen K. Nippers was found on May 25th of 1981, and she was identified legally on May 25th of 2021, but she was potentially identified back in 2019. So there was kind of an issue with her identification in 2019, hence why legally she was identified in 2021. The Wetzel County Jane Doe was found on February 13th of 1983. She is still unidentified. The DeSoto County Jane Doe was found on January 24th of 1985, but she's still unidentified. Elizabeth Lamont, she was found on April 14th of 1985. She was identified in November of 2018. She was a potential victim, but has since been linked to Robert Evans, who is the chameleon killer, who is Terry Peter Rasmussen, who is a serial killer that's actually linked to New Hampshire. Or I also did a video about his victims, the Bear Brook State Park murders, or the Bear Brook 4. I'll also put that in a card above. The Pulaski County Jane Doe, she was found on April 20th of 1985. She's still unidentified. Betty Lou Wisley was found on August 29th of 1987. She was identified in 2023, or she's also known as the Roane County Jane Doe. Stacy Lynn Chahorsky, she was found in 1988. She was known as the Rising Fawn Jane Doe. She was identified in 2019, but her killer was identified in 2020, and this is Henry Frederick Wise, or aka Hoss Wise. So I have an idea with him, and I think that him and the Bible Belt Strangler worked together because Hoss Wise was also a truck driver. I have that theory in one of the videos, also in my playlist as well. In the Benton County Jane Doe, she was found on May 7th of 1990. She was identified on October 25th of 2022, and Alvin Bruton, her boyfriend, is suspected of killing her, but he died in prison back in 2008. So I highly suspect that Jerry Johns, seeing as how he was a trucker, is the killer, and where they were found is so prevalent because truck drivers go along certain routes, and all of these girls were found along major routes off the side of the road. They all had reddish tinged hair, or like dishwasher blonde hair, where it's like brownish, kind of like this, where there's deep roots with blonde. They were all fair, freckled, and they had medium to long length shoulder hair length hair, and they're all specific statured. And if Haas Wise was identified as the killer of Stacy Lynn Jaworski, he's also a truck driver, there is a possibility that he knew Jerry Johns as well. Alonzo Pierre Mingo has been charged with second-degree murder charges with intent. So 3 counts to be exact. While pretending to be a delivery driver for a package, it is said that Pierre Mingo entered a home and killed 3 occupants. He was charged as of Monday with these crimes. So when police arrived at the scene, they found the remains of Jorge Alexander Reyes Jungwirth, who's 20, Shannon Patricia Jungwirth, who's 42, and Mario Alberto Trejo Estrada, who was 39. There was also 2 small children on the premises that weren't hurt, but they were there during the shooting. There's also surveillance footage that shows a suspect getting out of a blue Nissan Altima with 2 other suspects in the vehicle, one carrying the box and in a UPS-style uniform, which was determined to be that of Alonzo Pierre Mingo. When they see him carrying the box, after he gets to the door, he's seen holding a man at gunpoint, making him bring him inside to the others in the home, in which they believe he's demanding money from them. They all leave the room, and then when he comes back into the room with the woman, he shoots her. And then the children are seen coming back into the room, and they see her, resulting in them crying because they see her obviously deceased. He has a $5 million bond set and could potentially face up to 40 years in prison. He has been previously convicted of aggravated battery, unlawful use of a weapon, and possession of a firearm, which is a felony in Illinois. So it's after he killed the woman is when, it's either before he killed the woman or after he killed the woman is when it's believed he killed the 2 other men on the premises. Are you ready for another goodie? So there has been another arrest made in the murder case involving Courtney Clenny, who was an OnlyFans model. So the parents of Courtney Clenny have been charged in connection to the murder of Christian Abuselli. So Christian Abuselli was her boyfriend, and he was fatally stabbed in the condo that him and Courtney resided in. It is said that her parents had access to his laptop and may have tampered with evidence that could potentially have been on said laptop. Courtney, however, has been charged with second-degree murder in connection to the killing that took place on April 3rd of 2022. She has since pled not guilty in connection to the murder and is being held without bond in regards to this as she waits for a trial. Following the arrest, it's believed that Abuselli was the victim of domestic violence or domestic abuse. Clenny's lawyer has rebutted this or refuted this and said that she was actually the victim of domestic violence and not Abuselli. She also maintains that she acted in self-defense, even though his family has claimed that she was the one that abused him and manipulated him and his family. I have also linked the YouTube video of her, it's supposed to be her 911 call, but of her talking to police where she literally has a bikini on. And it's really bizarre. This whole case is super bizarre. Really nuts and wild. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about one of my favorite people. We're going to talk about Herbert Baumeister, or the I-70 killer. Herbert Baumeister and Robert Hansen, something intrigues me about them. Anywho, some of the remains found at Fox Hollow Farm have been identified. So if you don't know about Fox Hollow Farm, it's the estate, or was the estate, of Herbert Baumeister, a once respected thrift store multi-millionaire that turned killer who owned this lavish estate with his wife and their 3 children. So little did his family know he was actually a serial killer that had been terrorizing the Midwest for quite some time prior to anyone even realizing it. So Herbert Baumeister did commit suicide back on July 3rd of 1996, or unalived himself, as people like to say, because they don't like the S word, in Pinnery Provincial Park in Canada via a GSW gunshot wound, prior to police being able to arrest him for his crimes. But what we're going to discuss today is some of the bones that were found on his Indiana estate have been identified. The oddity about him is that it is known he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, an antisocial personality disorder from a young age, and also urophilia. If you don't know what urophilia is, he wanted to know what human urine tastes like. I was severely disgusted by this when I saw this. I'm sure if someone potentially put 2 and 2 together, they would have realized that he was the I-70 strangler at some point. Manuel Resendez has been missing since 1993. When he disappeared, he was 34 years old and he has never been seen since. Back in 1996, there was a search of Fox Hollow Farm in which remains were recovered. Tens of thousands of bones were recovered, to be exact. These bones were said to be charred and were found on the 18-acre estate in Westfield. Last year, so 2023, a family member of Resendez submitted a DNA sample in hopes of some answers, and those prayers were answered. So whether it was what they wanted to hear or not, they had finally figured out what happened to Manuel. Herbert Baumeister is suspected to having killed at least 25 men And this is after he lured them from either gay bars or off the streets within the same 4-block radius in Indianapolis or downtown Indianapolis. And after luring them with potential sexual encounter, he would subdue them and ultimately kill them. So we know definitively that he killed at least 11, but it could potentially be as high as 25 plus. All of these were committed in either Indiana, also Ohio, within the years of 1980 to 1995. So the reason he's called the I-70 Strangler is that most of his victims were found dumped near the I-70, but they've also found bones on his property. So his known victims are 15-year-old Michael Sean Petrie. He was found on June 16th of 1980 in Hamilton County, Indiana, and he was reported missing on June 7th of 1980. His cause of death is strangulation. Most of these, the cause of death is strangulation. I'll just say that. Maurice Allen Taylor was 22. He was found in Weasel Creek in Hamilton County, Indiana on July 21st of 1982. It's suspected that he was strangled, but not completely concluded as that being his cause of death because of how his body was. He was known to do sex work in the area in order to support himself. Delvoyd Lee Baker, who was 14, was found in a river near Hamilton County on October 3rd of 1982. He was found semi-nude and was last seen alive on October 2nd, so just the day before. It's believed that he had been frequenting bars in the area for the last few months of his life in order to do sex work to support himself or to make extra money. Michael Andrew Riley was 22, or Mick as he went by. So Mick was last seen at the Vogue Theater, which was a popular nightclub in downtown Indianapolis, within that same 4-block radius, on May 28th of 1983. There was a tip that came in about Herbert Baumeister being the last person seen with Mick, and this tip came in February of 1998. So Mick would be found in a ditch on June 5th of 1983, so just a week later after he was last seen alive. And this was southeast of Greenfield in Indiana, and he was strangled with a towel. Eric Allen Roetger, Roettger, was 17. He went missing on May 7th of 1985. He was found a few days later in Preble County, Ohio, in a stream. He had been strangled via a rope, and he had a burn mark on his left shoulder. Michael Allen Glenn was 29. He was found only in his underwear on August 15th of 1986 in a ditch near Eaton, Ohio. It was determined that he was strangled via a rope due to rope marks on his neck. He was identified years later using his fingerprints. James Boyd Robbins Jr. was 21. He went missing on October 15th of 1987 after leaving his mother's home shortly after 10 p.m. that evening. His remains would be found on the 17th, so 2 days later, and he would be found nude in a ditch in Shelby County, south of Gwynville. Strangulation markings were found, and this was determined to be his cause of death. Stephen Lynn Elliott was 26. His remains were discovered on August 12th of 1989 in Preble County, Ohio, just near the I-70. He was strangled and found just in his underwear. It is presumed he died via strangulation with a rope. Clay Russell Boatman was 32. He was an LPN that went missing on August 14th of 1990 after leaving his apartment in Richmond, Indiana. He was known to be going to Our Place, which was a local bar within that 4-mile radius, and that was the last time he was seen. When his body was found in a ditch just some time later, there were signs of strangulation. There was actually a group of kids that found his remains near Eaton, Ohio. Thomas Ray Clevenger Jr., who was 18, went missing on September 6th of 1990. His remains were found near a railroad track in Greenville, Ohio, and he was semi-nude. Otto Gary Becker, who was the oldest, 42, the oldest known victim of Herbert Baumeister. He was found near a gravel road in Henry County, Indiana, in a ditch on August 6th of 1991. He was last seen with a male in a car north of the I-70. But there is also a ton of others that are assumed to be victims, but not confirmed. So John Lee Bayer, who was 20, he went missing on May 28th of 1993. Most of these men still have not been found. Jeffrey Allen Jones was 31, went missing on July 6th of 1993. Richard Douglas Hamilton Jr., who was 20, went missing on July 31st of 1993. Alan Lee Livingston went missing on August 6th of 1993. Remains were found during the first search on the farm in 1996, but he wasn't identified until October of 2023. So that's a positive. Stephen Sperlin Hale was 28. He went missing on April 1st of 1994. Alan Wayne Broussard was 28 and went missing on June 6th of 1994. Roger Allen Goodlett was 33, missing on July 22nd of 1994, went missing after leaving his mother's house. Michael Frederick Kern was 45. He went missing on March 31st of 1995. His jacket was found at Fox Hollow Farm. So if they prove he is a victim of Herbert Baumeister, he will be the oldest victim of Herbert Baumeister. Manuel Resendez, as I mentioned above, he is a confirmed victim of Herbert Baumeister. And Jerry Williams Comer was 34. He's an additional victim that went missing on August 8th of 1995, and he fits the profile of Herbert Baumeister's other victims. So hopefully those tens of thousands of bone fragments that were charred, they will potentially figure out who exactly they are, because they deserve to have their name back. They deserve to be properly buried, and their families, more importantly, deserve to know what happened to them. So that, my friends, is this week's true crime recap. A lot happened this week. There's actually a lot more that happened this week that I'm not covering, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for all of my Valentine's crimes videos. Bye.